She walked out for pizza on a Friday night, a normal spring break evening for a 16-year-old girl. What dragged her into the darkness wasn't just one monster, but three. And what they did to Sharron Pryor in that frozen field wasn't just murder. It was an act of such calculated, savage terror that Canada still can't forget it, or find all the killers who still walk among us. It's 1975, a Friday night buzzing with teenage energy. A 16-year-old girl steps out for pizza with friends, laughing under the streetlights. Hours later, she vanishes without a trace. What followed wasn't just a murder, it was a nightmare that froze a nation. A crime so brutal, so haunting, it remains etched into Canada's memory decades later. This is the story of Sharron Pryor. And it's not just about how she died. It's about the terror that refused to die with her. This story starts in a place where nobody locked their doors. Point St. Charles, Montreal, a tight-knit, working-class neighborhood where the smell of factory smoke mixed with baking bread. And everybody knew your name. Kids played stickball in the streets. Neighbors leaned over fences to gossip. It felt safe, until March 29th, 1975, ripped that safety apart forever. Sharron Pryor was just 16. Not just a name in a headline, a real girl. Bright-eyed, artistic, with a laugh that echoed down the hallway of her family's apartment. She loved dancing to Bowie, daydreamed about seeing Europe, and drove her sisters crazy borrowing their clothes. That night, she threw on her favorite faded denim jacket, the one with the embroidered flowers on the collar. Spring break had just begun. The last of the dirty snow was melting, and you could almost taste the freedom in the air. She kissed her mom goodbye, told her she'd be back by 10:30, just heading a few blocks away to meet friends at the local pizzeria. A normal Friday night, the streetlights flickered on as she walked. Some neighbors later recalled seeing her, just a girl in a denim jacket, walking alone into the gathering dusk. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing felt wrong. But darkness wasn't just falling over Montreal that night. It was waiting, hunting, and it was about to swallow Sharron Pryor whole. Think about the last time you waited for someone who never showed up. That creeping unease, the clock ticking louder. Now imagine that feeling twisting into raw terror. Because the person you're waiting for is a 16-year-old girl who vanished on a short walk to get pizza. That's where Sharron Pryor's story becomes a nightmare. Not in the shadows, but in the agonizing stretch of minutes, hours, and days when hope battled dread. Sharron never made it to the pizzeria. Her friends, Linda and Louise, arrived first. They grabbed a booth, ordered a large pepperoni, laughed about school being out. They kept checking the door, every jingle of the bell. Every person walking in, they looked up, expecting Sharron's smile. Minutes dragged. The pizza arrived, steaming hot. They waited, ate a slice, grew annoyed. Where is she? Maybe she got held up at home. Maybe she changed her mind. Teenage logic. They paid, left, assumed she'd show up at someone's house later. They carried that guilt for decades. Back at the Pryor apartment on Center Street, the clock kept ticking past 10:30. Sharron's curfew. Her mother, Yvonne, started pacing, checking the window, listening for footsteps on the stairs. Nothing. 11 p.m. A knot of worry tightened in her stomach. Sharron was reliable. She always called if she was late. Yvonne phoned Linda. Is Sharron with you? The answer froze her blood. No, Mrs. Pryor. We waited, she never came. Panic detonated. Yvonne called Sharron's father. Eddie called friends, called anyone who might have seen her daughter. Midnight came. The streets outside were quiet, indifferent. Inside that apartment, fear was a living thing, choking the air. Yvonne did what any desperate mother would do. She called the police. My daughter is missing. She's only 16. She wouldn't just disappear. Officers came, took notes, checked her room, asked about boyfriends, arguments, standard procedure. But Yvonne knew. This wasn't a runaway. This was wrong. Deep in her bones. She felt it. A mother's instinct screaming danger. By 2 a.m., Yvonne was on the radio. Her voice, thick with tears and terror, crackled over Montreal's airwaves. Please, if anyone has seen Sharron, she's 16, wearing a blue denim jacket. Please, if you know anything, bring her home. Can you imagine making that plea? Broadcasting your worst fear into the void of the night. Hoping against hope some stranger heard something. Saw something. Dawn broke on March 30th. No Sharron. The neighborhood awoke to a chilling new reality. Flyers, hastily printed with Sharron's school photo, that hopeful smile now a cruel reminder, appeared on lampposts. Shop windows. Car windshields. Missing Sharron Pryor. Friends, family, neighbors, even strangers. Formed search parties. They combed back alleys, peered into abandoned garages, walked the railway tracks calling her name. Sharron, Sharron. Their voices echoing, unanswered, against the brick walls of Point St. Charles. They checked parks, diners, anywhere teenagers might hang out. Nothing, not a single trace. Rumors started, ugly whispers snaking through the community. Had she run off with someone? Gotten into trouble? But those who knew Sharron shut it down. This wasn't her. The search grew bigger. Police expanded the perimeter. Volunteers came from other parts of the city. Thousands of eyes scanning every street, every patch of waste ground. They found nothing. No dropped earring. No torn piece of her jacket. No struggle. It was as if the sidewalk had simply swallowed her whole between her home and that pizzeria. Day 2, March 31st, Easter Sunday. A day for family. For hope renewed. For the Pryors. It was torture. The phone rang constantly, tips. Well-wishers. Cranks. Each one a fresh stab of hope, followed by crushing disappointment. Yvonne barely slept, jumping at every sound. Sharron's sisters, Deborah and Doreen, huddled together, lost and scared. The festive table felt like a mockery. Where was Sharron? The question hung, suffocating, over the uneaten food. The search parties went out again, fueled by desperation now, not just hope. Rain started to fall, turning the city gray, washing away any hope of finding footprints or clues. It felt like the sky was crying. Day 3, April 1st, April Fool's Day. A cruel joke. The flyers were soggy, disintegrating on the lampposts. Exhaustion was setting in for the searchers. The police were stretched thin. That initial burst of communal energy was fading into a grim, helpless dread. Had she just vanished? Was she hurt somewhere? Unable to call out? The worst possibilities, the ones no one wanted to voice, started to take root in people's minds. But they kept looking. They had to. For Yvonne. For Sharron. Then, around noon on April 1st, a call crackled over police radios. Not in Point St. Charles. Not even in Montreal. Across the wide, cold expanse of the St. Lawrence River. In Longueuil, a jogger, taking a shortcut through a barren, muddy field, near Highway 20, a place called Parc de la Cite. He saw something that didn't belong, something dumped, something human-shaped. He moved closer, his heart pounding, hoping he was wrong. He wasn't. The call that came to the Pryor apartment wasn't the one they prayed for. It wasn't "we found her. She's okay." It was detectives, their voices heavy, asking Yvonne and Eddie to come down to the station, asking about dental records, asking about Sharron's clothes. That drive, across the bridge to Longueuil, must have felt like crossing into hell. They already knew. That crushing silence in the car. The way the world outside the window seemed to blur and warp. The desperate, silent plea. Please, not her. Please, let it be a mistake. They didn't find just a body. The police on the scene knew that instantly. The posture, the condition, the location. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a simple murder. This was a scene of pure horror. A young life ended with unspeakable cruelty, discarded like trash in that cold, muddy field. The jogger had stumbled upon the end of Sharron Pryor's nightmare. But for her family, for Montreal, the real nightmare, the one of knowing what happened, and who could do such a thing, was only just beginning. The search for Sharron was over. Now began the desperate, agonizing search for the monsters who took her. What the jogger saw in that muddy field wasn't just a body. It was a message, left by monsters who wanted the world to see what they could do. What they did to a 16-year-old girl who only wanted pizza with friends. Sharron lay 15 miles from her home, 15 miles from the warm kitchen where she'd kissed her mother goodbye. The field in Longueuil was desolate, cold mud, patches of dirty snow, the distant roar of Highway 20. It felt like the edge of the world, a place chosen not by chance, but because it was empty, because it was cruel, because nobody would hear her. The first officers on the scene knew instantly this was evil. Not a crime of passion, not a sudden burst of anger. This was methodical. This was torture. Sharron's clothes were torn, ripped apart with force. Her wrists, they were bound, tied, restrained. This wasn't a struggle that got out of hand. This was planned control. She'd been helpless. The violence screamed from every detail. She'd been beaten, brutally, repeatedly. The force wasn't just to subdue. It was rage, hatred, poured onto her young body. She'd been raped, violated in the most horrific way imaginable. And finally, they'd strangled her, taken her breath, ended her life. The sequence itself was terrifying, the binding, the beating, the assault, the killing, each step a deeper descent into depravity. This wasn't just murder, it was annihilation. But the worst detail, the one that sent chills down the spines of hardened detectives? The mud, that cold, wet, unforgiving mud. It held a secret, clear as day. Pressed into the earth around Sharron's body were footprints. Not one set, not two, three. Three distinct sets of footprints. Men's shoes, different sizes, walking around her, standing over her, working together. Think about that. 3 predators, 3 men, moving around a bound and terrified girl in a deserted field. It wasn't a frenzied attack. It was coordinated. It was deliberate. It was teamwork in horror. One holding her, another beating her, the third watching, or all participating. The footprints didn't just tell them how many. They screamed what kind. This wasn't a lone, desperate killer. This was a pack, hunting together, killing together. The location screamed calculation too. Why drag her across the St. Lawrence River? Why choose Longueuil? Because it was a different jurisdiction. Because Montreal police wouldn't automatically look there. Because it created confusion. Delay, precious time for the killers to vanish. They knew what they were doing. They understood police boundaries. They exploited them. And the field itself, Parc de la Cite, not a park anyone strolled through. An isolated patch of wasteland near the highway. Easy to drive to. Easy to dump something. Easy to escape. They knew the area, or they scouted it. This wasn't random. It was selected. A killing ground. The evidence laid it bare. They found a crumpled cigarette pack nearby. Cheap. Common. A clue that felt deliberately mocking. Tire tracks led in and out. Deep impressions in the mud from a heavy vehicle. Maybe a van. Crucial evidence, but useless without a specific car to match it to. The footprints were clear, but without the shoes that made them. They were just shapes in dirt. The brutality had a cold efficiency. The binding wasn't rough rope found nearby. It was something they brought. They came prepared to restrain. The beating wasn't just fists. It was savage, overwhelming force. The sexual assault wasn't opportunistic. It was part of the violation. The power. The strangulation was the final, controlled act. Start to finish, it screamed calculation. Control. A business-like brutality. This was torture. Physical. Yes. The unimaginable pain inflicted on Sharron's body. But also psychological. The terror of being taken. The horror of being bound and helpless. The agony of knowing what was coming. The sheer, overwhelming cruelty of 3 against 1. It wasn't just about killing her. It was about breaking her, degrading her, making her suffer. The scene painted a picture that haunts investigators to this day. 3 men, 1 vehicle, driving a terrified girl across a river in the night, taking her to a dark, empty field, binding her, surrounding her, beating her, raping her, strangling her, leaving her broken body in the mud like garbage, and then driving away, back into the night, back into the city, back into their lives. As if nothing happened, the footprints in the mud weren't just evidence. They were a signature, a boast, proof that evil wasn't just walking among the people of Montreal. It was walking in a pack, and it had just shown exactly what it was capable of. Sharron Pryor wasn't just murdered. She was hunted, captured, and executed by a team, and the sheer, cold-blooded organization of it. That was perhaps the most terrifying discovery of all. The monsters weren't impulsive. They were planners, and they got away with it. Imagine knowing monsters walked free, knowing they left your daughter broken in a field, and knowing the police, no matter how hard they tried, couldn't catch them. That was the hell the Pryor family entered, a hell that lasted for decades. After the horror of finding Sharron, the Montreal police launched one of the biggest investigations the city had ever seen. They were determined, furious. The savagery demanded justice. Tips poured in, 5,000 of them, 5,000 names, rumors, hunches, and fragments of information. Every single one chased down. Every lead followed until it hit a wall, and every wall led to the same crushing truth. 0 arrests. 0 charges. Nothing. Why? Why couldn't they catch them? The answer was written in the mud of that field. Sharron's killers were careful. Brutal, but careful. They left no fingerprints on her body. No stray hairs easily found back then. No DNA they could test in 1975. They left only chilling clues that whispered, but didn't speak names. The crumpled cigarette pack? Cheap, common, sold everywhere. It pointed to 1,000 men, not one. The tire tracks? Deep impressions in the mud, clearly from a vehicle, maybe a van, maybe a heavy car. Crucial evidence, but without the specific vehicle to match it to. Just a ghost pattern. Useless. And then there were the footprints. Those 3 sets of footprints circling Sharron's body. Frozen in the mud. A silent accusation against 3 unknown men. Detectives made casts of them. Perfect. Haunting molds of the soles that stood over her. They had the killer's shoes, but not their feet. Not their names. The footprints screamed 3 men, but offered no way to find them. As the weeks turned into months with no arrests, the whispers started. Loud, ugly whispers that filled the streets of Point St. Charles and echoed in the newspapers. Biker gangs? Montreal in the 70s was rife with them. Violent. Territorial. Did Sharron accidentally see something? Cross paths with the wrong people? Was this a message killing? A punishment? The theory took hold. It felt plausible in the climate of fear. Police grilled known gang members. Leaned hard. Got nothing but denials and dead ends. Then, darker whispers. Ritual killing? The binding. The location. The sheer, overwhelming violence of 3 against 1. It felt ceremonial. Sickening. People talked about cults. About Satanism creeping into the city. Fear curdled into superstition. Parents held their children closer, eyeing strangers with new suspicion. Police investigated these angles too, chasing shadows into even darker corners. Finding nothing but more fear, more confusion, and then, a name surfaced that sent a different kind of chill through the investigation. Gerald Archer. A notorious serial killer already in prison. A monster who preyed on young women. His crimes were brutal, sadistic. And his known timeline? He was active in Canada around the same time. Could it be him? Had he slipped into Montreal? Was Sharron one of his victims? The hope was desperate. If it was Archer, at least he was already caught. At least there was an answer. Police questioned him intensely, dug into his movements, compared his methods. But the pieces didn't fit perfectly. The binding wasn't quite his style. The 3 perpetrators didn't match his lone wolf pattern. And crucially, no solid proof placed him near Montreal that night. Another door slammed shut. Another dead end. Archer was a horror, but likely not this horror. Months bled into years. The massive investigation shrank. Detectives were reassigned. The flood of tips became a trickle, then dried up. The case file, once bursting with frantic energy, grew dusty. The case turned ice cold. Not forgotten by those who cared, but frozen in place. Stuck in 1975 with those footprints and no answers. For Sharron's family, this was torture worse than waiting. Before, there was hope. The searchers, the flyers, the pleas, it was action. It was fighting. Now, there was nothing but silence. And the question that hung over every meal, every birthday, every Christmas, who could do this? Yvonne Pryor, Sharron's mother, lived with that question like a physical weight. She'd stare out the window, watching girls walk by in denim jackets, and wonder, are you out there? Are you laughing in some bar? Did you marry? Do you have children? Do you ever think about what you did to my girl? The not knowing was a poison. It infected everything. It stole sleep. It turned ordinary sounds, a car door slamming, an unknown number calling, into moments of heart-stopping dread. Is it them? Have they found something? Sharron's sisters, Deborah and Doreen, grew up in the long shadow of that question. How do you move forward when your sister's killers are walking free? When any man on the street, any face in a crowd, could be one of them? The world felt permanently unsafe. Trust was broken. The fear wasn't abstract. It was tied to 3 specific, unknown monsters who proved they could strike anyone, anywhere, and vanish. The police hadn't given up. Not entirely. The case file was never officially closed. But leads were non-existent. Resources were needed for new crimes. The footprints sat in an evidence room. The tire track photos faded. The cigarette pack was just an object. The investigation was stuck, trapped by the limitations of 1975, by the careful cruelty of 3 men, and by the sheer, frustrating lack of a single, solid break. Sharron Pryor's murder wasn't just a tragedy. It became a terrifying open wound on the city, a reminder that sometimes, evil doesn't just win, it disappears. It fades back into the everyday world, leaving only devastation and an unbearable, echoing question. Who? For the Pryors, that question wasn't just about justice. It was about survival. How do you breathe when the air is thick with the presence of unseen killers? They lived it, every single day. 46 years. Imagine waiting 46 years for an answer. Hoping, praying, that someday, somehow, the monsters who tore your world apart would finally have a name. And then, in 2021, the phone rings. It's the police. They have a name, but the answer they give you isn't justice. It's a ghost. Decades crawled by. Sharron Pryor's case wasn't forgotten. Not by her family, not by the detectives who carried the weight of her unsolved murder. But the world moved on. Technology leaped forward, and deep in an evidence room, tucked away with those haunting plaster casts of footprints and the faded tire track photos, sat something tiny, almost invisible, biological evidence. Traces of the killers left on Sharron's body. DNA. In 1975, it was useless, a meaningless smear. By the 2000s, it was a key. Police quietly submitted it for testing, hoping science could break the silence. Nothing. Years passed. More testing. More waiting. The science got better. Sharper. Still nothing. It felt like the killers had truly vanished. Like they'd cheated time itself. Then, 2021, a bombshell. A detective picked up the phone, called Yvonne Pryor's surviving daughters, Deborah and Doreen, called Sharron's sister, who was now older than Sharron ever got to be. We have a match. The name, Franklin Maywood Romine. Who was he? Not a shadowy mastermind, not a famous criminal, a drifter, a violent ghost haunting the edges of society. Born in West Virginia, a rap sheet that painted a picture of pure, predatory danger, assault, rape, burglary, a man who moved like smoke across state lines, across borders, escapes from prison. He didn't stay put. He didn't follow rules. He took what he wanted. And in 1975, he wasn't just in Montreal. He was living blocks from Sharron Pryor's home on Center Street in Point St. Charles. He breathed the same air, walked the same sidewalks, saw the same teenagers laughing outside the pizzeria. The DNA match was solid, unmistakable. Franklin Romine was one of the men in that field, one of the 3 sets of footprints circling Sharron's broken body. After 46 years of screaming silence, they finally had a name for one of the monsters. But here's the twist, the gut punch, the cruel joke of fate. Franklin Maywood Romine died in 1982, 7 years after Sharron's murder. He was 36 years old. He died in West Virginia, not in a shootout, not on death row, likely from illness. He took every secret he had about that night in Long Gale straight to his grave. He never stood trial. He never confessed. He never named the other 2 men whose footprints stood beside his in the mud. Think about that. For nearly half a century, the Pryors waited. They endured the agony of not knowing. And when the answer finally came, it was to learn that one of Sharron's killers had been dead for almost 40 years. Free, unpunished, living his life after snuffing hers out. The relief of having a name curdled instantly into a new kind of fury, a new kind of helplessness. He was beyond reach, beyond punishment, beyond any earthly justice. What did they know about Romine? Enough to terrify. He wasn't just a thief. His crimes screamed violence against women. He was a predator, a man who used force, who took. He drifted West Virginia, Ohio, Canada. He slipped across borders easily. He knew how to disappear. He knew how prisons worked, and he knew how to escape them. He was exactly the kind of man capable of the calculated savagery inflicted on Sharron, the kind who might run with others just as dangerous. And that's the haunting question that slammed shut with Romine's death. Who were the other 2? The DNA confirmed Romine was one of the 3. But the other 2 footprints? The other sets of shoes pressing into that cold mud? They remained and still remain, utterly unknown. Did Romine run with a crew? Were they fellow drifters? Biker associates from Montreal's violent underworld? Local thugs? Were they still alive? Had they, like Romine, lived full lives? Died old men in their beds? Were they out there right now? Grandfathers? Neighbors? Hiding blood-soaked secrets? The breakthrough was real. It was science triumphing over time. It gave Sharron's family one concrete fact. Franklin Romine did this. He was there. He participated in the horror. But it also ripped open old wounds. Because it confirmed the worst fear. Sharron had been murdered by multiple men, and at least 2 of them had completely escaped. Not just justice. Not just identification. They had escaped everything. They were phantoms. For Deborah. For Doreen. The news was a hurricane of emotions. Vindication, their decades of pushing, of refusing to let the case die, had forced this answer. Fury, that Romine died free. Profound sadness that their mother, Yvonne, who had died years earlier begging for answers, never got to hear this name, and a crushing, familiar dread. Who else? The question wasn't answered. It was just narrowed down, from 3 shadows to 2. Police. Scrambled. With Romine's name, they dug back into 1975. Who did he associate with in Montreal? Where did he hang out? Who were his known contacts? They tracked old addresses, old friends, old criminal networks. They hoped Romine's name might shake loose a memory, a deathbed confession from someone else, a clue pointing to the other 2. But the trail was stone cold. The people who might have known were dead, or silent, or lost to time. The other killers remained hidden, protected by the decades, protected by Romine's silence, protected by sheer, dumb luck. So, the DNA gave them a name, but it was a name carved on a tombstone. It brought no closure, only confirmation of the nightmare's scale. Sharron Pryor was murdered by 3 men. One was Franklin Maywood Romine, a violent drifter who died young and free. The other 2, they are still just footprints, echoes of evil fading into the past, known only to themselves, and to the muddy ground that witnessed what they did to a 16-year-old girl who wanted pizza. Most murders fade. Time passes. Memories blur. But Sharron Pryor's story? It clings. It crawls under your skin and stays there. Because this wasn't just a crime. It was a blueprint for pure terror. And that blueprint is still out there. 3 reasons this case chills us to the bone, decades later. 3 reasons it's not just history, it's a warning. First, the boldness. Think about where they took her. Not from a dark alley. Not from some isolated path. Sharron vanished from a busy street. In her own neighborhood, on a Friday night. Center Street. Lampposts glowing. Neighbors nearby. People coming and going. She was walking a short, familiar route to meet friends. It should have been safe. It felt safe. But the monsters didn't lurk in shadows that night. They struck in plain sight. They grabbed a 16-year-old girl, full of life, from under the streetlights of her own community. How? A car pulling up fast? A sudden arm snatching her into an alley? A friendly face turning cruel? We don't know, but the sheer audacity is paralyzing. They didn't fear being seen. They didn't fear getting caught in the act. They acted like they owned the night, like they owned her. That level of boldness isn't just scary. It shatters the illusion of safety anywhere, anytime. If it happened there, on that street, to that girl, it could happen anywhere. Second, the savagery. What they did to Sharron in that field, it wasn't murder. That word feels too small, too clean. This was an execution, a systematic dismantling of a human being, binding her, beating her, raping her, strangling her. 3 against 1. It wasn't quick. It wasn't impulsive rage. The footprints circling her body prove it was deliberate, calculated. They took their time. They inflicted pain. They inflicted terror. They violated her utterly. This was torture for torture's sake, a display of pure, unrestrained evil. Calling it murder feels like calling a hurricane a summer breeze. It was annihilation. It was hatred made flesh. And the savagery wasn't hidden. They left her body to be found. A message in the mud. That level of cruelty isn't just horrifying. It's inhuman. It forces us to confront the terrifying reality that monsters who can do this walk among us. Not as obvious fiends, but as men. Men who might smile at you in the grocery line. Third, the silence. This is perhaps the most chilling part. 3 killers, 3 sets of footprints, 3 men who committed an act of unspeakable horror together. And then poof, they vanished. Into thin air. For nearly 50 years. How? How does a trio of monsters simply disappear after something like this? Did they have an alibi network? Were they protected? Feared into silence by powerful people, bikers, gangs? Did the very chaos of Montreal in the 70s swallow them whole? Or were they just lucky? Unthinkably, disgustingly lucky? The silence is deafening. It screams of a conspiracy, not of planning the crime, but of surviving it. A pact of silence. 3 men carrying this monstrous secret for decades. Living normal lives, working jobs, having families, laughing, while Sharron's family screamed into the void. The fact that they got away with it for so long. That science only found one of them after he was decades dead. proves how deep that silence ran. It suggests evil can hide. It can blend in. It can wear the mask of an ordinary man. And that is perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. We may never know the full truth. We may never know the names of the other two sets of footprints. We may never understand why Sharron, or how they chose her. That uncertainty is its own kind of torture. Sharron's mother, Yvonne, knew this torture intimately. She lived with the screaming question, who? Every single day until she died. She died begging for answers. Her voice, once pleading on the radio for her daughter's return, became a whisper begging for justice, for simply knowing. The weight of that unknown broke her. Piece by piece, year by year. She never got peace. Only the grave offered escape from the horror. But the fight isn't over. Sharron's sister, Deborah, still fights today. She carries the torch Yvonne couldn't. She pushes the police. She speaks Sharron's name. She demands the other two footprints be identified. She fights not just for Sharron, but for every family living with that crushing silence. She fights because the alternative, letting the monsters win completely, letting them fade into history without ever facing their crime, is unthinkable. Her fight is a testament to love's endurance against unimaginable evil. It's also a stark reminder. This case isn't closed. The terror isn't past tense. That's why Sharron Pryor's story still terrifies. Not because it's old, not because it's gruesome, but because it holds up a dark mirror. It shows us the boldness of evil operating in the open. It shows us the savagery humans are capable of inflicting. And it shows us the silence that can cloak monsters, letting them walk, free among us, maybe even next to us. It tells us the boogeyman isn't under the bed. He's the man down the street. He's the quiet neighbor. He's the face you don't notice. And sometimes, he doesn't work alone. Sometimes, he has friends. That's the true, enduring nightmare of Sharron Pryor. It's the proof that the worst monsters aren't just out there. They're hidden in plain sight. And they got away with it. Sharron Pryor didn't just die in that muddy field. A piece of innocence died with her. Not just her family's innocence. A whole city's. And the echoes of that loss? They didn't fade. They rewrote rules. They changed how police work. And they left scars you can still feel on the streets of Montreal today. Sharron's case did something rare. It forced change. Brutal, cold reality crashed into a system unprepared for such calculated, cross-border evil. The flaws weren't just exposed. They were laid bare, raw and bleeding. Cross-jurisdiction cooperation? It was a mess in 1975. Montreal cops and Longueuil cops? Separate worlds, separate files, separate procedures. Crucial hours, maybe days, were lost arguing over who was in charge while Sharron lay undiscovered across the river. Her death screamed the need for a unified approach. Protocols were ripped up, new ones written, communication channels blasted open. Sharron's name became a grim lesson in the cost of bureaucratic walls. When evil doesn't respect borders, neither can the hunt for justice. And then, the science, DNA. In 1975, it was science fiction. That tiny trace evidence? Worthless. But her case, along with others like it, became a battering ram. Families like the Pryors, screaming into the void for answers, became the loudest voices demanding investment. Funding for DNA labs? 4 cold case units dedicated to re-examining old evidence with new eyes? Sharron's tragedy, the sheer waste of having clues but no tools, poured fuel on that fire. Every breakthrough in forensic science since carries a whisper of cases like hers, cases where evidence sat waiting for technology to catch up. The DNA match to Romine in 2021? That wasn't just science winning. It was Sharron's legacy forcing a door open decades after she was gone. But beyond the reports, the policy changes, the new protocols stamped lessons learned, lies the real legacy. The human cost. The scars. Walk down Center Street in Point St. Charles today, past the old brick apartments. The Pryor family home, it still stands. For years after Sharron vanished. Her mother Yvonne lived there. Trapped. Haunted. Sharron's room, they kept it. Untouched. Like a museum exhibit of a life stolen. Her clothes hanging in the closet. Her school books on the desk. Her perfume bottle gathering dust. A shrine to unbearable loss. A physical manifestation of a grief that couldn't, move on. Walking past that window, you don't see just bricks and glass. You see a mother's broken heart frozen in time. And the neighborhood? Talk to the older residents. The ones who were kids in 1975. The ones who remember the posters. The search parties. The suffocating fear. Ask them about locking doors. They'll tell you. Before Sharron, doors were left unlocked. Kids played outside until dark. Neighbors popped in unannounced. Trust was the air they breathed. After Sharron, locks clicked shut. Curfews tightened. Strangers were watched with hawk eyes. The friendly street felt exposed. Dangerous. That ingrained habit? Locking doors a little faster. That instinctive flick of the eyes, glancing twice at shadows, especially on a spring evening? That's Sharron's legacy too. It's muscle memory forged in terror. A community learned the hardest lesson. Safety is an illusion. Evil isn't picky. The monsters weren't faceless demons from a storybook. They weren't lurking out there in some distant, dark forest. They walked here, on these sidewalks, breathed this air, maybe bought cigarettes at the corner store, maybe nodded hello to a neighbor. They were real men who chose to do the unspeakable just blocks from where families ate dinner. Children slept. Lives unfolded. That proximity is the deepest scar. It shatters the comforting lie that horror only happens elsewhere. To other people, Sharron was their girl, taken from their street. The terror wasn't imported. It was homegrown. And that knowledge changes a place forever. It embeds a low hum of anxiety into the very bricks of the buildings. Sharron's case became a ghost story whispered not in the dark, but in the harsh light of day, a reminder tattooed on the city's soul. Every time a cold case gets renewed attention because of better DNA tech. Her name echoes. Every time police forces across jurisdictions coordinate seamlessly on a major crime, the shadow of the failures in 1975 lingers. And every time a parent in Point St. Charles instinctively calls their child home a little earlier as dusk falls, or double-checks the deadbolt, they are living in the world Sharron's murder made. A world just a little harder, a little colder, a little more aware of the darkness that can walk beside you. Her legacy isn't just in the files and the forensics. It's in the weight of memory. It's in the way an ordinary street in an ordinary neighborhood became a landmark of profound grief and collective fear. It's in the empty space at family tables for decades. It's in the tireless fight of her sister Deborah, refusing to let the world forget, refusing to let the other two footprints fade into nothing. Sharron Pryor's name isn't just a victim's name on a cold case file. It's a haunting, a reminder etched into Canada's consciousness. Monsters are real. They lived here. They killed here. And the ghosts of that night, the ghosts of Point St. Charles, they don't rest. They walk with us, asking the same relentless, unanswered question. Who? Sharron Pryor's story isn't about closure. It's about the echo of a scream that never fades. A girl who loved dancing, who dreamed of travel, reduced to a crime scene photo, and the haunting truth. Her killers could still be out there. Old men now, maybe grandfathers, living with blood on their hands. So we tell this story not for thrills, but because forgetting, that's the real terror.